Hello, everyone. Welcome to this spotlight on clients and creativity. Some familiar names I see cropping up on the Zoom. Wherever you're dialing in from in terms of company or geography, you're most welcome. We're delighted to have you with us. We've got a fantastic group, he says modestly with his own picture on the slide. We have some brilliant guest speakers today, including Paul Kemp-Robertson from Contagious, who's one of the co-authors of this report. Marta from Heineken and Tiff Dulling from New York from RGA. Both of those also took part in our report. Before we get started, just some context for you. First of all, for those of you who are newer to these sessions, they're designed to be interactive. So please do feel free to put any comments in the chat or questions within the Q&A, and then we will allow time to put those questions, especially to Marta and Tiff, at the end of this session. We should have you with us for just under an hour, probably about 50 minutes today, and we will make the slides and the recording available if it's helpful to you to pass on to your colleagues. And again, for those of you who are newer to the WFA, or those of you who aren't, you may not be aware that we have two types of members. Firstly, proud to have 60 national advertiser associations around the world. I know some of those are joining today, and also now over 140 company members, multinational companies. So hopefully you're seeing your logo up there if you're representing one of those organizations. Now, to the topic, those of you who know WFA are aware that beyond the kind of micro value that we deliver to members, like with this sort of webinar, we also focus on macro so industry level topics. For example, these leadership initiatives that you see here. And you may wonder why I'm talking about these in relation to clients and creativity. And there's a reason for that. Certainly, if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals as an example of the sort of world's problems, we know the majority of you see actually creativity is the most valuable contribution that we can make as a function towards those. So definitely from a planet perspective, but also from a people perspective as well. And here I'm sharing some learnings from one of my colleagues, Camelia, and our excellent DEI task force. We talk about the different stages where brand owners can address bias in the creative process, or potential bias. And I'm sure, as we all know, without diversity of talent, we lack diversity of thought, which obviously impacts on creative effectiveness. There we get to the crux of the challenge here, in that despite creativity being marketing superpower, many different sources will tell us that actually creative communications effectiveness is in decline. So I'm showing you a chart here from the IPA in the UK, and I know people like Orlando Wood, Peter Field, and Les Binet have been analysing that over time and have seen that there is a downwards trend in terms of effectiveness. And I know a lot of our members say we focus too much on the problems and the plumbing and not enough on the people and the art, which is why we are seeking to address this with this study. Now, it's designed to complement a lot of the work that's out there. Obviously, some fantastic work that you see at Cannes Lions and on other platforms as well. But this exclusively, and I think the first time, focused just on multinational, so global client-side organizations to see the barriers and how we might look to address those. And thank you for those of you on this webinar today who took part, but we had 640 marketing leaders who responded to the quant. And thanks to my colleague, Ioana Danila, we had a superb sample of marketers from different markets via our National Advertiser Association, so 34 different countries, so truly global. And those local marketers, national marketers, came thanks to these national advertiser associations. So you might know the ANA in the US, or ACA in Canada, or ISBA in the UK. If hopefully you know quite a few of these already. So that is enough from me, other than to say I'm going to welcome Paul Kemp-Robertson back to the WFA, no stranger to our stage. In fact, was on our stage in Athens at our conference, weren't you, Paul? So
I was, yeah.
but we're gonna before I ask Paul to share with you a little bit more on the outputs. We're going to, if Joel wouldn't mind throwing up a poll, we're going to ask for our members who are on this webinar right now to see how honest you are in relation to your performance in relation to briefing. So the question is, how would you rate your organization's performance in terms of briefing? Would you say it's excellent, we're top of the game, good, we tend to inspire, average, much room for improvement, or poor, more confusing than inspiring? Now, we did this same webinar but with slightly different stakeholders yesterday for the sort of APAC time zone, and they were very honest. So it'd be fascinating. It'd be fascinating to see the responses from the group that we have on today. So Joel, if you're able to, that's interesting. You guys are a little bit more bullish. So 10% saying excellent, top of our game. Good, but the largest number, 57%, saying average, so much room for improvement. For reference, the one yesterday was 70% said they were average, actually, and nobody thought they were excellent. So, well, congratulations to those of you who are feeling confident about it. And Paul, any observations? But I will hand the mic to you, as it were.
Thank you. No, I'd be interested to see the country stereotypes split there, and how many of the excellents were the very sort of confident and bullish Americans versus the slightly more lugubrious and cynical Brits in the average and low there. But thanks, everyone. Good to see you all. Now, the opening segment of the Clients and Creativity report, we called it a superhero with clipped wings. And what we meant by that was that marketers intrinsically know that creativity is a vital skill. It's a powerful weapon. However, there seems to be a disconnect between the belief and the day-to-day reality, because nearly half of those surveyed regard creativity as the last legal means of gaining an unfair advantage over competition. It's a hat tip to DDB founder Bill Bernbach, who coined that expression. But interestingly, only 28% of the respondents actually ranked creativity as business critical, and a similar percentage rate the performance of their own company's creative comms effort practical, purposeful, compared to just 8% who think their brand is producing iconic and culturally relevant work. So clearly there's a tension in the industry between acknowledging the power and the value of standout creativity and then actually authorizing its use. And that perhaps explains why effectiveness is in decline. So for me, at a time when superhero movie franchises are reigning absolutely supreme at the box office, it's curious to see that the marketing industry is underestimating and underinvesting in its own superpower, creativity. After all, there are numerous studies showing that fame, engendered by creativity, is directly correlated to marketplace effectiveness. John Hegarty told us as part of the research, you can't buy something that you can't remember. But it's not all doom and gloom, I promise you. The study does provide the prospect of a rewarding ending. It shows that companies fortunate enough to be enjoying growth are those more likely to regard creativity as business critical. 43% of all respondents view creativity as extremely important, meaning that 71% of global marketers are big fan of creativity. But clearly there is a tension or a dichotomy when it comes to the perception of an investment in creativity for the industry as a whole. So before I turn in a few minutes to our excellent experts from the client and agency side, Marta and Tiffany, I thought it'd be interesting to explore some of the blockers and the enablers that we picked up on that are actually sort of that will help reverse the decline in communications effectiveness. So briefing was seen as an obvious enabler. If we can get better briefing, I think 50% of respondents said that improving the briefing process is a route to increasing the chances of an organization being more creative. Now, this is only 1 percentage point lower than an improved understanding of consumer at 51%. So when we looked at both the qual and the quant behind the Clients and Creativity report, it was clear to see an urge amongst marketers to bring back the human touch to the briefing process. I think data and testing has become such a crutch that briefing is now almost regarded as a lost art, and it's a neglected role in the creative process. So to reclaim the power of an effective brief, I think trust and transparency between partners is vital. As you'll see from this quote from Bayer Health CMO Patricia Cortzi, if we could just move the slide along, I think her advice was to overinvest time and energy during the briefing. Co-create the brief, yes, but leave space and respect for the agency to respond, and collaborate with your partners. Give them a holistic view of your business, she said, not just project by project. Now, another expert that we interviewed when compiling the report was John Schoolcraft, the creative director from Oatly, and he argued that an over-reliance on data can hinder the chances of developing a creatively compelling and strategically differentiated. He said, make ads for humans, not marketing department. Quite a good man. Now, he said, everyone has got the same data. If you're looking at the problem with the same data set, you're probably going to come up with the same answers. Competitors. Creativity is the only thing out there that can massively change the prospect of a business. So in short, what we were hearing was that briefs need to champion creativity as much as they champion internal KPIs and mandatory. And this point was echoed by former Dentsu Chief Creative Officer, Merle Jamie, who took part in the qual. She warned against using research as a crutch when formulating a brief. Interestingly, she said, too much research is a barrier. She said, marketers, you are gifted with intelligence and intuition, so you cannot let your consumers decide for your brand. Research is good to guide, but leave room for your own passion, your expertise, and gut reaction. So we move on to too many cooks. I think one of the biggest blockers to creative effectiveness is that too many cook syndrome. You'll see here from this slide, 44% of the marketers surveyed admitted that their internal culture means a sort of unwieldy number of decision makers get involved in the creative process. That leads to unclear responsibilities, and that just adds to the complexity and the lack of clarity. So the way that we sort of define this culture in the report is a sort of process-driven environment within an organization with many layers and stakeholders. And this is especially true for multinational and matrixed organizations. So moving on, like how to combat that complexity. I think 48% of respondents think that the answer lies in adopting a more integrated and focused approach, which is more likely achieved, I think, with strong leadership on the client side. Truth hurts, but not everyone needs to have their say. As you can see here from Adidas's head of global marketing, Vicky Free, in a video, she told us creativity and innovation is not a democratic process. Everyone does not get a voice. So what we were sort of looking at was, the benefit of smaller, more agile teams with clearly defined roles and responsibilities. They are a feature at a lot of the more forward-thinking organizations. Vicky Free says that the best work is polarizing. She said the best, most memorable work has got lovers and haters. If everybody loves it, it can just be wallpaper. So the opposite of love is not hate. Everyone has a say and has gotten to the point where it just meets everybody's needs. There's no sharp one, and you need teeth to resonate in such a noisy world that we live in. Now, a culture that sort of tolerates too many cooks inevitably fosters a risk-averse environment where fresh, original, potentially deviant creativity can be stifled, and that leads to conformist, unexceptional communications that stick within customary guardrails and reflect the status quo. I think this is why risk aversion was rated as the biggest blocker to creative effectiveness. This was cited by 51% of the respondents. So building a sort of greater tolerance for risk requires a change of cultural mindset, as well as reducing the number of stakeholders involved in that decision-making process. There was a message that came through loud and clear in many of the qual interviews that we did, was that marketers need to get more comfortable with being uncomfortable. Getting to the best creative ideas is not always easy. Marketers need to tolerate this internal culture where healthy dissent and awkward questions are tolerated as part of the process. I think Bayer's Patricia Corsi said that creativity has to be provocative. If everyone thinks an idea is good, chances are you're missing the mark. One of the plagues of creativity, she said, is to seek alignment. I've never seen a wonderful campaign where everyone is that word again. And then, as you see here, Oatly's John Schoolcraft, he echoed this. He said, creativity is not about safety. Creativity is actually about taking some huge, massive chances, believing in something. So as we wrote in the Clients and Creativity report, leave room for some creative risk briefs and the way that your agencies respond. The question to ask is, will this idea connect with consumers and then encourage them to act, even though the execution may be pushing your comfort level? To take some chances, trust your agencies. One of the best ways to sort of move the dial on that built-in tendency to risk aversion is to acknowledge the increased levels of effectiveness being driven by all those creative communications out there that stand out in the category precisely because they are that little bit braver, fresher, more unexpected, and more entertaining. Okay, time for me to welcome Marta Garcia Alonso, the Global Director, Brand Building Transformation at Heineken, a Contagious client. Marta, hello, how are you doing?
Hello, do you see me?
Yes, see you loud and clear. So in Amsterdam. Now, I'd be interested to know your initial reactions to the findings, how the clients and creativity study resonates with you from a Heineken perspective. There are plenty of truths in there. What are the things you want to pick out?
So first, thank you to the WFA and to you, Paul, and Contagious, and all the colleagues that have helped to put this together. I find it's a very complete and useful study, and I really loved reading it, and I really felt quite recognized in many of the insights, not always on the good ones. So I think two things from my side and kind of bringing the client perspective, probably. The first thing, at the end of the study, you see Sir John Hegarty talking about creativity is essential. And then when you go into the numbers, you see that only 28% of people felt that creativity was business critical. And even you go to Europe and you see a 24%. So it really struck me when I saw the numbers. And me coming from big organizations, I really feel every day that creativity is struggling to survive. And if you think about it, we are the marketers, and we are the function that can create and protect the culture where creativity can thrive. So I believe that one of the things that we have to do as clients and marketers is making sure that the importance of creativity within our organization becomes an imperative. Because if in the moment that you decide that, probably, and you're able to agree on that with your organization, then some of the challenges and barriers that you were discussing, Paul, I think some of them could be solved. There was, and it's related also with what is your creative ambition and how do you want to use creativity as a competitive advantage. I read a beautiful sentence yesterday. It's kind of a metaphor, but it really connected to what I was thinking about this topic. They say stonemason wouldn't approach building a wall the same way as building a cathedral. And I find that sometimes we are really focusing on the business in the short term. We are over-focused on performance marketing. And this is somewhat making us, especially the marketers, I would say, and we bring the agencies with us in building quick and weak walls, and losing sight that when we are building brands, we are building cathedrals. So, and how we can really protect that. So this is one of the things that I would like to share today with you. And the second thing is that I find sometimes, especially in these big organizations, that we don't fully understand how creativity works. And I would use maybe also a sentence that is kind of, sometimes we have a romantic view that creativity is going to survive because it's so cool and it's fun and everything. But the reality is that what I have found in my career is creativity is like energy. But the energy to move in an organization, it needs pipes. And it needs kind of a very robust system to wear it across the organization, to protect it and to nurture it. Because if not, normally it doesn't survive. We are always in these big organizations where we're for control, risk aversion, looking for efficiencies. So when you look at how to create this creative system, and we have worked on that, Paul, with you in Contagious and with some of other colleagues in the agencies, you have to start, of course, with culture, rewarding and recognizing the value of creativity, but then really follow it by a very disciplined system in which talent, governance, performance metrics, processes are really thoroughly meticulously planned. And I know that it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but I feel like the more you protect creativity is the only way really to make it work in big organizations like ours.
And how often do you feel uncomfortable in your job? Enough? Not enough?
So I think the more years I've been working on marketing, the more I feel uncomfortable, but also it's because I learned also along my career how creativity could really change the business. And at the beginning, probably when you're younger, a young marketeer, you don't see it so often. Sometimes by luck, you see amazing creativity happening. But I believe that creativity is kind of more and more also when senior marketers really protect the system and allow a safe system to create really very disruptive creativity and allow the teams to be very uncomfortable. So I believe that every day I feel more uncomfortable, and this means that we are in the good direction.
Good place. Excellent. Thank you, Marta. If you hang on for a sec, we're going to bring in Tiffany now, and then we'll do the Q&A with you at the end. So thank you. Hi, Tiffany.
Hi, Paul.
How are you doing? So
thanks for having me. It was great to hear Marta.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming back. You've had a long weekend in the US, so thank you for spending your first day back at work with us. Appreciate it.
I know, it's always a shift. It's like right back into it.
Yeah, full wardrobe and everything now. So back to school. So I think really it was just the same question for you. I mean, obviously, you contributed to the report, which we're very grateful for, some fantastic insight. But what were your observations from sort of reading it? What were the things that stood out?
Yeah, well, also great job and thanks again, and thanks for including me. And like Marta, just seeing the themes and recognizing those themes, it makes you feel less alone when you're trying to figure out these big challenges. And so that I think just overall stood out is just how this isn't just an RGA thing or a certain kind of client thing. These are themes that are happening across the industry, and how can we help each other get through them and overcome some of these big challenges. Because as a chief creative officer, obviously believe a lot in creativity and what it means for business. So for me, a couple of the themes that really stood out, and I picked ones that just on a daily basis are issues that come up, are things I'm trying to solve for, and also they had some tension in them. Because I think the fear in recognizing some of these challenges, one thing to recognize them, but like, how do you solve them? And also not assuming that the way to solve them is to go back to like the way things used to be, or to try to, replicate a process from the past. There's a little bit of this historic nostalgia of like simpler times. And I think, we can't do that either. So that's a big one for me, is how do we look at these themes and go, how do we move forward, and what's the new way? So two of the themes that really stood out was the short-termism, around creativity needing time and space, and the too many cooks. So on the first one, with the short-termism, there is a tension here. The culture horizon is very short-term today. And we have to keep up with that pace. The media platforms of the past versus now are on totally different timeframes. Like news and what's happening in culture happens by the moment. But I think it's also important to balance that the business horizon should be longer term. And how do we think about that, in that longer vision and roadmap, rather than just overnight, everything needing to be overnight success, overnight wins, what is enough for us to like keep moving forward versus shifting courses. Because I think in the stimulus of everything around us, we have such real-time, information coming at us. That stimulus can be overwhelming, and it can start to create a lack of confidence in what we need to do. Do we need to change? Do we need to move? Do we need to shift into another direction? This just happened. And I think we have to balance being responsive and being able to react in a smart way, with being confident with our strategy that we set out with the creative platform that we set out with, and making sure we're building on something over time, even if we're acting on it daily. And it's really important, I think, that we work with clients to understand, who they are as a business, what some of their bigger challenges are, what is that longer roadmap, but that also we can build on that daily and not just keep shifting courses, because that can be the response that you start to get as a collective hive when you're seeing all this happening real time. And I think it's a real issue too, in that tenures, both on the agency and client side, are just shorter. I think I read somewhere, Wall Street Journal, I think, posted, and I'm sure you've done some on, like, the CMO tenure is around 3 years now, which is a pretty short period of time. There's a lot more turnover in agency, and that's even more important, that you're defining what brands stand for, what their role is, what their business challenges are, that as different CMOs, as different agencies might come in and out of them as well. And I think those are challenges we're all facing that are just different than what they were before, and solve for them a little bit differently today. So that was one area that I think gravitated towards. And for me, yes, it is about having the longer term vision, but being able to be fast, being able to move in real time. We can't have months to concept things. Pitches happen in days now. That's, I don't think, going away. But if you have an idea, creative platform that you understand, believe in for a longer period of time, it is about creating more nimble ways of activating it. on a day-to-day basis, and setting some, I think, clearer, simpler KPIs. What are some quick wins we can all hold hands on that give us the confidence to move forward? So we're not shifting courses daily.
Which leads, I guess, nicely into the too many cooks, which is your other, that, can you be agile, nimble with, so what about decision making? I know you've got some thoughts on maybe needing a bit more diversity.
Yeah, this one had some tension in it as well. And it's something that we've discussed a lot. You don't want to eliminate different perspectives. To me, it's about having perspectives, but not necessarily many approvals. Okay. I do think the complicated types of programs that we're launching, as a place like RGA, oftentimes it goes across different teams at an organization and internally, whether that be like the CX side of the client's organization to marketing. So we do need often multiple perspectives, but what is that core decision-making team? And also, I like to say creativity is everyone's job. It doesn't mean creativity is all around everyone's input on the concept. Creativity has to happen along the whole process. Legal feedback coming up. How do we have our legal team? And as we think about legal issues, how do we solve those issues creatively? As we think about media execution, there's opportunity to bring that perspective into those decisions rather than everyone trying to feedback, let's say on a creative concept. There's opportunity for everyone to weigh in with perspective, but it's about really designing where those perspectives come in and having an agile, accountable team that's empowered to make some decisions so that the integrity of an idea can move forward, because it starts to chip away. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's the telephone game. Before you know it, what comes out the other end, it's nothing like what you had designed to solve for a big business challenge up front.
Good point. So I think that's good timing now to bring Marta back and Rob. We can look at some questions. I just think I had one kick off, which I'm going to aim at you, Marta, is like, how do you look to overcome the sort of stakeholder complexity? It was something that was alluded to in the report. You've got stakeholder complexity of organizations that can lead to decision by committee. So, at Heineken, how do you make sure that you get, the right people get a voice, but the right individual gets the final?
So this is clearly one of the things that we are trying every day to do a bit better, let's say, and we are not wonderful. So there is a new rule that our chief commercial officer brought, James Thompson, that I love. There is he says, if you want to have an opinion, you must come to the briefing session. So if you're not in a briefing session, you don't have an opinion, which I love. What we have seen, because we are a company that we have more than 300 brands, and we are a very decentralized structure in the case of Heineken. So the reality is that all this decision by committee becomes quite difficult for us, because the general managers in the local operating companies, sometimes they have an opinion or they approve creativity. So one of the things that we have started to do in the last 18 months was to train general managers, even regional presidents, not with the intention to have them in the creative process, but more to make them understand how delicate process, how difficult, and also creating a safe environment for the marketers, really to create work without having too many cooks in the process. So this is one thing that is working quite well. And the second thing is that, again, because of the shorterism, one of the things that discover is that we are doing so many briefs, and there are so many short-term briefs that people are lacking time, and the senior marketers in the organization were delegating the creative process to the most junior people in the team. So then the senior people were coming after. So one of the things also that we are bringing back is that this is a true process that requires a strong leadership, because in the moment that you just share a brief, there are 20, 30, 40 people in the agencies working on finding a solution to your problem. And so we are asking the senior marketers always to be in the room. So these two things are helping us. And also as a final thought, and this is more cultural thing that I find that is in the world, is like everyone is looking for perfection, and we believe that creativity has nothing to do with perfection. It's more on the contrary, because it's really true creativity will challenge the status quo and will challenge what we think is right or wrong. So when you're doing decisions by committee, everyone is sharpening a bit to make it more perfect, which is probably killing the creativity.
Good point. Now we've got some audience questions to go into in a second, but I just wanted to just push that over to you, Tiff. Does decision by committee, is that a phrase that brings you out in hive?
I've been through so much. I don't even get hives anymore in terms of everything. I'm used to it all. Again, I think that the point about perspectives, not, committee approvals, I think is really the key. Like, I'm not about, hey, I need to go away to Starbucks with my, creative partner and solve this on my own. I think we need to bring in and understand all the complexity, all the challenges. It's just about where does that come in and how are we all onboarded onto the real challenges of the brand, the team that is on, the agency team understands those challenges. So we're all solving those together and have that baked in. And then it's like trust. It's like, let's also trust where we can come up with great solutions that are going to connect with people that solve those challenges. I think that starts with, one of your areas is around briefing. How do we get at the real core of what those barriers are for the brands? I think sometimes briefs can just be a KPI on a page. We need to create sales by this much in 3 days, rather than like, what are the real barriers? Who's the audience? And when we get to those real questions, we can solve it, the real meaty issues that brands face. And briefs often are moving so fast. We're not having those deeper conversations. And to me, it's like, you need those two altitudes. You have to understand the real business challenges as a creative person to help solve them. But yes, there can be then a different altitude of brief that is like solving the real-time changes that are happening as we see daily, and how do we operate at both those levels simultaneously?
Okay, good point. Okay, so the question from the audience, anonymous attendee. I think we'll aim this one that Rob's going to answer. Do you want to take the first one, Rob?
To be honest with you, I thought you might want to field a response to a couple of these as well, Paul, which is why I was jumping on. But one of the first questions that came up, and it sort of made me smile because they had a lot of this from the creative leaders that we spoke to, didn't we, on the research, was there are times when creative bravery might not go through well in ASI, Creative Spark, or I guess link testing, but eventually boost the brand well in the marketplace. It would be a pity if such copies were scrapped based on scores alone. And what is the take of the panel on that? Marta, maybe you'd like to talk a little bit to creative testing and your thoughts around that.
What a nice question. Okay, so I'm going to be as honest as I can. To be very honest with you, like, we are completely obsessed in our company about creative effectiveness, I would say. And we have quite a lot of processes in how to test creativity. So we are quite thorough in following numbers and the way we look at that. But also we have created at the same time a process in which you look at numbers to learn and you look at numbers to improve and not to kill creativity, which is very important. So not because, of course, we are passionate about numbers and link testing and everything. It's more about how you use these numbers to help you to be more brave or to help you to achieve better creativity. And this is what is helping us to manage the tension sometimes.
Tiff, I suspect I have an inkling of what your response might be, but do you want to take that one? I mean, this is a client-centric study, right? So clients are over-reliant on creative testing, which kills creativity.
Well, I mean, I think Marta's response was really great. It's going to happen, but to me, it's about learning, not keeping ideas alive or killing. And I don't think we're going to go back to a world where we don't use data to inform, but it is an opinion, right? It's a collective opinion. And I think it needs to just help shape potentially the right pieces, but not be the end all be all. We can't use it to take away our minds and decision-making and mitigate risk. I think at the end of the day that talk about a risk culture, feel like that somehow mitigates risk, but just because it apparently tested well doesn't mitigate risk. And in many cases, going with that kind of average campaign that somehow, flew through testing could be as risky in and of itself, or doing nothing could be even more risky. So again, de-risking does not, in your mind through testing, does not eliminate risk.
And thank you. And Paul, we heard from Ed Bell from Cathay Pacific yesterday, and we were talking about the sort of going from the testing and looking to sort of bravery and I'm going to paraphrase him here. He said, "Only stupid people rely on courage," which I thought was quite nice. So is there an in-between point in terms of
there is an in-between. I think when it comes to bravery marketing, it's all about context. People say that you should never use the word bravery in marketing because firefighters and nurses are brave, marketers can't be brave, but it is about context because your job's on the line, your brand performance is on the line, ideas that might take you out of your company. But I think, one of the things that came through in the report is that yes, rely on data, use it, listen to your audience, understand them, but ultimately you understand your brand better than anybody else. You have to be the expert. And as long as, again, this is a thing that came through in the report, as long as you've got a clear sense of what your brand purpose is, and that doesn't necessarily mean the brand purpose is going to change the world. It's like what your brand stands for, what it's about, what its history is, and have that very clear sense of purpose about the brand. That should give you the guts and the internal permission to take some risk and to align with ideas that perhaps feel a little bit uncomfortable. Because as John from Oakley said, if everyone relies on the same data and the same tests and the same scores and all the rest of it, that's why so much of advertising looks the same, because people aren't making those creative leaps. They're stuck to the status quo mentality.
Thank you. And Tiff, this might talk to client obsession with ROI, and I don't know how healthy that necessarily is when we talk about marketing effectiveness, but an anonymous attendee here, and by the way, please feel free to post your questions to anyone else who hasn't, but they said, how do you connect brand building with return on investment as the eternal fight to get more budget if it's not tied to immediate sales? It talks a bit to the short-termism you mentioned. Any thoughts on?
I think a little bit of what Paul was just saying is how I think you connect it. It have to know what your brand stands for. I think you have to know and define that really clearly and represent that authentically over time. And that building over time, I think you start to see success. I don't know that there'll ever be. I think the closest we get to return on investment is we now are in a real-time culture where you get to see response from people out in the world and how they respond to that. And more community is going to be a signal of return on investment, real time. You understand, you're building with your audience in new ways, building product with them, getting response from them real time. And to me, that's going to be a big signal for understanding it. They'll have those signals from their communities immediately and understand the value of putting some of those ideas out there that deliver on what their brand stands for. So you won't necessarily need to look at the book, the data that's coming in on a spreadsheet, you'll feel it immediately.
And willing to share any clients who you think have found that balance and are doing a good job around that at all, Tiffany? Or any that spring not to put you on the spot too much?
I know, all of my clients.
They're amazing.
Every single one of them.
There are iconic brands that I think have done a great job building over time, taking risk. We know what they see. P&G I look at as a brand that has really defined what it stands for, taken some risks in terms of how it shows up in the world, and connecting that I think meaningfully to its product. Dove is one I always think is an amazing example, where this is a brand that really has stuck with what they've stood for the last 20 years, when they really went away from, hey, we're going to not just be a soap brand with 2% lotion, and talk about how that softens skin up to 17%, but said we can be the brand that helps women understand what it's beautiful. And we're going to show women like no brand has ever shown them, as real women, in all different ages, ethnicities, and we're going to celebrate and help them feel beautiful. And that was actually based on data that said that I think 87% of women didn't believe that they were beautiful. So there's a way to take data, there's a way to take research and then turn that into a really beautiful insight that helps you shape a brand that stands for much more for people. And that ends up haloing all of your products in a way that drives success. So that's one that really stands out to me. And all of them, I think, at its core are what you got to, Paul, where they feel like they know who they are. It connects meaningfully to what their products are. It's not co-opting culture. If you don't really define that and understand your role in culture and how that meaningfully, I think, connects to your product, then you will be out there trying a bunch of things and having to shift courses. But if you really stand for something, I think you have a lot of permission to try things that are risky. People forgive you if you make mistakes, but it comes from a place that connects with who you are as a brand, and who you are as a brand, even from a product perspective as well. So I think that's the core, and the ones that I think get that right are the ones that are able to take risks and show how brand build connect to investment for your original.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Marta, obviously a very big question, but in terms of marketing effectiveness and balancing that.
And Heineken, of course.
Yeah, exactly. How do you look to address that within Heineken? Because you must experience the same tension in terms of targets, right? And how do you?
I think most of the clients, we are looking for the state of the art in terms of return on investment, in which you look at the marketing mix modelings that they give you the short term, but also how to link this with how your brand equity is growing. I think in most of the cases, what I have seen or what I see in Heineken, that we are very good at understanding the short-term return on investment of what we do, even by touch point, by campaign, by brand, and we put a lot of effort in understanding that. But we have to understand that also return on investment is only a KPI. But you also have to look at how much you can grow the business. And also when you look at the long term, there are more studies now from like Cantar Connect or other studies that they are helping us to understand where are the touch points that are creating more long term, for instance. And we are trying to connect all our marketing mix modelings with long term. To be very honest, so far in our case, it's not easy. And I would love to see if some of our colleagues in the call, they have probably already the state of the art in marketing mix modeling. We still don't have it, but we're working towards it.
Absolutely. Without trying to pitch, we're actually doing a session on that in Amsterdam, funnily enough, in November, specifically on that topic. And Mark Ritson will be revealing the secrets of how to get that right. But there's a question there around effective advertising channels, but I think that's probably perhaps one to take offline, to objectives as a brand overall. But I just have one question, Paul. This was obviously focused on global marketers overall in terms of a global scope, but a lot of the local marketers enabled us to look at sort of regional differences. And some of the things that we really saw came up in Asia Pacific and in Latin America in particular was the importance of local difference and creativity. So, all well and good, arguably vanilla global creative, but how do you really balance that? So any thoughts in terms of the clients you work with and how you become truly locally relevant?
I mean, it chimes with what Tiff said about like staying really close to your audience and also having permission, locally from the global hierarchy to actually stay very close and just to, be that sort of cultural vacuum cleaner, like hoovering up all the insights that you're gleaning along the way. And as again, it just ties back in, as long as you have that really strong core organizing principle, then it allows you to have, the scope, the creative scope to create ads that do have a local touch, but still connect back to that kind of overarching core global essence of what the brand is. So, things like, IKEA, they're very strong at that. They sort of went back to basics recently because they felt they were sort of falling out of relevance and, did that classic thing of going back in the archives, and they found that dusty old sheet from the founder in the 1970s was saying about the IKEA was all about creating better design, better everyday design for the everyday people kind of thing. And that's something which is a really strong overarching idea, but you look at the executions that have been done globally, locally. So for instance, like a recycling day where you could bring your IKEA products that you finished with or wanted to move on from back to the store, and they would give you a voucher, and take it off you, refurbish it and sell it. And that was a little idea that started in Denmark because it kind of made sense in a market like that, because externally you think, well, why would you recycle or bring back and resell IKEA furniture? It's cheap, isn't it? So on a branding point of view, you're making a really strong point that product is actually very, very strong ultimately. But that was an idea that because it worked in one market, it was then exploded globally. It's been, adopted in the US and so on. So it shows the power that some really strong local ideas can explode outwards and become global. So as long as they've got the permission and that sense of being connected to a bigger whole.
Yeah, to build on that, I think sometimes, and I see this even with creative teams, we can start to define an idea as like a piece of language or a campaign, when actually it's like what led to that is that purpose at the core of the founder of IKEA, the beginning. There's an idea there that I think can often be translated into different markets over time. You also have to look at it contextually how does the world change around it? But those ideas can be rethought through that lens, and not so narrowly define it as like a piece of language, a tagline, where sometimes then it becomes about, does this translate into a different one versus no, what at its core is this really about? And that's when I think you can really get amazing ideas consistently interpreted in a lot of different ways. And that same philosophy, I think, applies towards media channels and platforms. It's not about taking a TV spot and cutting it down to fit to the length of the platform, but it's like, no, what is that intersection of what this idea is and these platforms, or what is the intersection of what this idea is in the communities, and what is the intersection of what this idea is and the culture that's happening in this moment right now. And when you really think about that, that's what creativity and what ideas are versus just a tagline, a campaign, something written on a page. I think that's where you really can flex concepts and globally.
I think also, Rob, this is a question for Marta, because when you talk about local versus the global and giving that sort of power locally, it works best when there's a common language. When the brand has actually got, Heineken has got their ladder, obviously, and that's a unifying force. So if everyone is speaking the same language, has got the same like a ladder or a scale or a language to rally around, it injects a certain amount of objectivity into what is otherwise a subjective process. And I know that's something that's very close to Marta's heart. Maybe she would like to expand on the power of having a common language and voting scale.
I give you two examples. What we are seeing in Heineken is that, of course, there are some big campaigns or ideas that they resonate globally, and they really are like that we see that they work in many places. But also what we decided to do a few years ago is creating a language to discuss creativity in the organization. And this is allowing, as you're saying, that sometimes small ideas that they are born in a small market. For instance, the Grand Prix of Cannes last year, it was a small idea, started in Argentina, and just because we are sharing a lot of creativity across the organization, we have the creative councils, and ideas travel fast. Then it went into a lot of markets, into different brands, and it ended up being an amazing big idea. So definitely having a way in which you can discuss creativity within your organization, it will really help of these sometimes local ideas to become very big and be able to scale.
Well, certainly effective global frameworks and platforms like creative councils, I know, increasingly popular amongst our members and really help to change the game. So I'm afraid that we're out of time here now, all three of you, but I just wanted to share, a couple of you asked how you get hold of the document itself. If you haven't seen it, it's free to download here. You should see the URL at the top left there, wfanet.org/creativity. This is a non-commercial plug because it's free to WFA members, but don't forget to register for November 8th. Marta was mentioning about creative effectiveness, so we'll be in Amsterdam and featuring Mr. Ritson, who many of you have heard of before, our different forums. And then finally, last but not least, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Tiff in New York, Marta in Amsterdam, and Paul in London for joining us today. Really appreciate you being involved in the study in the first instance, and then providing some commentary. Plenty of work to do, of course, on the client side to keep us busy. But thank you, all three of you, on behalf of all of our members as well, your time. To appreciate.
Thanks, everyone.
It.